All right, so let's pick up where we left off. Where we left off last time was dealing with the Mishnah, where the Mishnah, we said, was an extremely cryptic Mishnah. And the Mishnah reads, once again, let's read the Mishnah again, where the Mishnah says, we're in the third Mishnah in the parak. So the Mishnah reads, Shum Kesev, which we explained from the Gemara meant, right? We said it's just reading the Mishnah is almost impossible to just read and translate. So where we understood from the Gemara was Shum Kesev meant an evaluation of money, meaning that everything needs to be evaluated. You don't just say even Steven, that both parties got damaged. You have to evaluate the situation. V'shava Kesev, and that we collect with that which is worth money, meaning like karka, like real estate. Bifnei bezdin, it has to be in front of a proper bezdin. That's coming to exclude. The Gemara says hedyotos, right? Those that are not fit for hora, being able to sit as a dayan in bezdin, meaning they lack smicha, the real smicha. And then the next condition over here is Va'al pi edim, which we said from the Gemara was prat lemoda b'mixas, was prat lemoda b'knas, was excluding someone who beats the edim. If we expect the damager to pay the penalty payments, that's only going to be if the edim, it's al pi edim, if the edim, the witnesses are the ones that are giving testimony in court, and then court is obligating him in the penalty. But if he obligates himself in the penalty, saying, not obligating himself in the penalty, obligates him in the indictment. I stole, I admit to what I did, before the Adim can give their testimony, so then he's not going to have to pay the penalty payment. Okay. That's where we got up to. So now take a look back at the Gemara. We're on, if you want to follow in the Hebrew, we're on page 1 in the packet on line 33. And in the Art Scroll photocopy, we're on page 6, line 15 in column 2. In the Art Scroll Gemara on page 6. Okay. So the Gemara writes the following. You got it, Jack? Yeah. Al pi edim, that it's in front of witnesses, meaning witnesses are the ones that are obligating him. Prat lemoda b'kanas. This is coming to exclude someone that admitted to something that would obligate them in a penalty. Va'achar kach bo edim shu pater. And then Adam come along and say that he stole or whatever it was. He's pater. He is now off the hook. So now, Hani Chalamanda Amar, this is all well and good according to the opinion who holds Modeh Biknas, that if someone is Modeh Biknas, Va'achach bo Adam, and then Adam come and indict him, pater, he'll be off the hook. But there is another opinion found in the Gemara about Modeh B'Knas. There is another opinion later on Daf Ayin Dalid about if someone admits and then witnesses come, they still have to pay the penalty payment, right? What we explained last time was that what would be the svara? What would be the logic to say that they shouldn't be obligated to pay? There's some form of a teshuva, right? They're making up for what they're being upfront about it. So there's one opinion though found in the Gemara that so what? You stole and you were caught. You have to pay the penalty. So then, according to that opinion, what is the Mishnah coming to teach me here? Al pi edim, ma'ikala meimar, seifa itzrchale. Really. Obviously, you're only gonna have to pay due to testimony of witnesses. But here, the Mishnah was just trying to set up the next halacha found in the Mishnah. What's the next halacha found in the Mishnah? The next halacha found in the Mishnah is that the Eidim have to be b'nei chorin u'b'nei bris. They have to be free people, and they have to be b'nei bris. They have to be Jewish. The witnesses cannot be slaves, and they cannot be those who are not Jewish. They need to be Jewish free individuals. Free as in they're not indentured servants. No, we're going to get to no, not women. Women are not. Women are
as a witness are now.
Right. Correct. Yeah. It's only free men who are Jewish. So says the Gemara, continues the Gemara, B'nei chorin l'mu'utei avadim. B'nei chorin excludes anyone who is a slave, and B'nei bris l'mu'utei ovdei kuchavim is coming to exclude someone who's not Jewish. Says the Gemara, V'tzricha, and I need both cases. Why do I need both cases? Listen to the Mishnah. Diashminan eved, because if we would have only thought that if it would have only taught that a slave is not allowed to be an aid, and you would assume, of course, a non-Jew can't be a slave. Why would you not assume that? Why would you maybe think a non-Jew can be a witness? Why would you think that? Mishum de'ein lo yachas. Oh, it's only an eved who loses their yachas. They lose their yuchsin. They lose their familial relationships. So therefore, that's why they can't be an aid. Aval nachri, however, a non-Jew, the yeshlo yachas, they have familial relationship. Emalo, perhaps they would be, a non-Jew would be allowed to be a witness. Now, why would having yuchsin, why would having a familial relationship make a difference whether or not you're allowed to be a witness? So here, there's a Gemara later on Pei Chesed Aleph that says the following: Ka'amar Mar Brei de Ravina. Eved Puzzle, that an Eved is not allowed to be a witness Mishum Shnei Amar, because it says in the Torah, Lo Yamusu Avos Al Banim, that a father is not allowed to die by the hands of his children. Lo Yumutu Al Pi Avos She'en Lo Chayim She'en Lo Chayas Banim, that an Av is not allowed to die by the hands of their children, meaning their children are not allowed to be witnesses for them. And Eved loses their familiar relationships. What?
Witnesses against them.
Yeah, exactly. If they're witnesses against him, so then that it wouldn't work. If you want to be a proper aid, you can't have a familiar relationship. Now, a non-Jew does have familiar relationships. Therefore, perhaps just based on that reading the Gemara alone, perhaps you would maybe consider that a non-Jew can be a witness if all it means is that they need to have that familiar relationship. So that's not how we assume, but that at least can help us understand what the thought process of the Gemara here is. Okay. Now the Gemara continues and it says, V'yashmina nachri, and if we would have only listed a non-Jew as being an inappropriate witness, as a witness that's no good, but you would still think that a slave can be. Why would you think a slave can't be? Mishum delay shaykh b'mitzos, because a non-Jew is not, they're not shaykh to mitzos. They are not obligated in mitzos. Therefore, how could they be a witness on something that is nothing to do with them, right? You have to be part of, you have to be a mitzuvah. You need to be somebody who's obligated in mitzos for you to even be shaykh to be an aid. Similar to like a child. A child can't be an aid because they're not obligated in mitzos yet, okay? Those shaykh b'mitzos aval eved, the shaykh b'mitzos emalo. However, an eved who is obligated in certain mitzos, they're obligated in all non-time bound mitzvos. Emalo, perhaps it would not be a problem for them to be a witness. Tzricha. That's why we need to list both these cases. So, bottom line, what comes out from this Mishnah is we're almost done with the Mishnah. The Mishnah said that we need to evaluate the money. We don't just assume it's even Steven if both parties got damaged. We can collect using real estate, and that it needs to be in front of Bezdin in a proper manner. What does that mean, in front of Bezdin in a proper manner? Meaning that it needs to be in front of a proper Bezdin, and it needs to be that the testimony that's being given forth is by people that are fitting to be Edom, as opposed to slaves or non-Jews. Let's continue now in the Mishnah. The Hanashim and women, Bechlal Hanezek, are included in the laws of damages. Now the Gemara it's fascinating. The Gemara goes now to bring scriptural sources that show how women are equally responsible for their property, and if their property caused damage, they would be liable to pay the reciprocity. Says the Gemara the following. We're on line 7 in the Hebrew, and in the English we are on page 8, line 20. Says the Gemara, Minahani Mili, how do I know that women are included in the laws of damages? Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav. Rabbi Yehuda said in the name of Rav, V'chein Tana Debei Rabbi Shmuel, and this is also a Tana Debei Rabbi Shmuel, Amar Kra, we learn from the Pasuk, Ish o Isha ki yasu mikol chata'as, that the Pasuk tells us in Parshas Vayikra that if a man or a woman do any of the following prohibitions, mikol chata'as, and it's talking about the laws of the carbon chatas, okay? So the fact that we say ish o isha in the context of violating prohibition in the Torah, so then for a hishva hakasav, the Gemara makes an equation between a man and a woman, between isha leish, l'cholon shabbatorah, with regard to all punishments in the Torah. All punishments in the Torah are equal between men and women. That's the source that women, this is what the Gemara is saying now, this is the source that women are liable to reciprocity for damages. Now, we can make a great, you have to just point out from this Gemara that it's noteworthy that what are we referring to damages as?
As a chait?
Yeah, as a sin. Yeah. Right? We had a whole discussion, right? We didn't even bring up this Gemara. This Gemara is just straight out, right? Of course it's a chait, right? This Gemara is so black and white that of course it's a chait to cause damage to another person, right? Okay. Debei Rabbi Elazar has another scriptural source. Tana ve'ela mishpatim asher tasim lifneihem. The Torah tells us these are the statutes that you will put in front of them. Hishva akas of ish la'ish, that with regard to mitzvos, the Torah seems to be indicating there's no difference between a man and a woman. The whole din in Shabbat Torah with regard to all civil law in the Torah. That's what the mishpatim are, all the civil law. The Torah doesn't seem to make any distinction by saying that it shouldn't apply to a woman. So therefore, of course, it should. The Debei Chizkiah Rabbi Yossi Aglili and the Debei Chizkiah Rabbi Yossi Aglili have the following scriptural source. Tana Amar Kra, it says in the pasuk Vehamis Ish O Isha, that when it comes to giving out the capital punishment, there's a correlation between men and women. Hishva Hakasav Isha Leish, the Torah correlates men and women. L'chol Misa Shabbat Torah with regard to the capital punishments in the Torah. And I need all three of these explanations. Okay, we're not going to go through the rest of it. We'll stop here for now. But what comes out from here is we have a pasuk in the Torah that is telling me that women are subject to the civil laws. Number one is we learn from the fact that it's a chait, and therefore that therefore, being that they are subject to the punishments related to doing a chait, to doing a sin, they should be subject to these rules as well of nezikin. Number two is with regard to the way the Torah brings down civil law, it does not make any distinction between men and women. To all of them, right? And then number three is with regard to the death penalty, which sometimes in the rules of damages, there are connections between the death penalty, like for example, by shor haniskal, an animal that needs to be put to death. If the animal ki egach shor et ish vamet. If an animal gores a person and it dies, sakoy sakel hashor. You have to kill the animal. Well, how does it read in the Torah? Let's get the pasuk. Let's here. I'll pull it up over here. The Torah tells us. Let's get it in Merkava. That there is something called a kofar payment. That if there's something called a kofar payment, that if your ox causes someone to die, so you won't be put to death, but not only the animal needs to be put to death, but you also need to pay kofar. You need to pay the value of the person. There's an additional penalty that's put upon, additional financial penalty in place of you being put to death. That's the language that the Torah uses. Here, the Torah says, let's see if we can find it. No, not Shmos. Looking for Mishpatim. So the Torah tells us in Parsha Mishpatim. Here. If the animal kills somebody, hashor yisakel, the animal is stoned, the gam ba'alav yumas, and the owner is also put to death. Now, we don't do that. We don't put the owner to death. What it means is that the owner has to pay a kofar penalty. They need to pay a payment in lieu of their life. Okay? So being that there's an equation in capital punishments between men and women, so too women are going to be included in the whole context of nizikin.
It's sort of like the eye for an eye.
Yes, yeah. Exactly. Okay.
At some point, I know you won't finish, but at some point, explain the witness rationale and the text behind it. Why women?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we'll get back to that. Yeah, for sure we will. Okay, good. Let's move on now to the next Mishnah. So we're on Mishnah Daled. So the Mishnah writes the following. We're on page in the Mishnayos. We're on page 16. In the Mishnayos, we're on page 16. So Charlie, in the next Mishnah it's in there? Okay, good. So the Mishnah writes the following. And let's take a step back before we get into this Mishnah and start going through it. Let's take a step back and explain what's going on. So we kind of touched on this, but earlier, but we said before that or it says in the Torah, right? We just read the pasuk that owners are responsible to pay for damages that their animal does if it was velo yishmarenu, if you weren't watching your animal, meaning that there's a behavior that you should be expecting your animal to do, and therefore you're expected to watch your animal in order so that it doesn't do what you're expecting it to do. So we said, for example, the animal walks along, right? And as it walks along, it steps on things, right? That you expect that, right? So you better watch your animal and make sure it doesn't, do that. You expect the animal, if it sees a food that it likes, it's going to start eating it. Well, you better watch it if you're going to be walking by somebody's field that they like the vegetables growing there, that they're not going to eat from it. These are things that you expect an animal to do those kinds of activities. There's some behavior, though, that's totally unexpected that an animal would do. Certain animals, right? Domesticated animals, you never expect domesticated animals to start acting in aggressive manners, okay? That they just start charging at people. That's something that's unexpected. So the Torah says that if there's damage that the animal does that's expected, which is called muad, that it's expected damage, it's a muad. So then you have to pay the full penalty related to that. You have to pay any, not penalty, I'm sorry, it's the wrong word. You have to pay all the damages that are incurred, right? But if it was unexpected damage, the Torah says, so then no, you do not have to pay the full damages. You would have to pay only half damages. If it's a tam, if it's a calm animal, you're not expecting it to act in a certain way, in an aggressive manner, so then you'd only have to pay half, because that's something that was unexpected. Unless it says in the Torah, this is all psukim in the Torah, unless it happens 3 times. If it happens 3 times, so then at that point, you're going to assume it's aggressive. You have to assume you have an aggressive animal. And therefore, you would if it happens again after that point, you'd have to pay the full damages, because it's already expected at that point. That is what we need. That's the background necessary. Those are all I did just now, was just tell you outside psukim that are in the Torah. So now we have to get to this Mishnah. With this background, we'll understand the Mishnah. The Mishnah says, Chamisha tamin v'chamisha muadin, that there are 5 types of an animal being 5 situations where animal will be a tam versus a muad. What would that be? Habehena ein muades, that the animal is not expected to lo ligeach, not to gore, v'lo ligof, and not to push. Well, these are all aggressive things. V'lo lishoch, and not to bite. V'lo lerbots, and not to squat. V'lo libot, and not to kick. These are all things that are unusual and aggressive activities. Fine. So therefore, you'd only have to pay half damages. All right. Hashain. So continues the Mishnah, and it says, the following we'll always consider it. Those 5 we always consider it to be a tam. Now, what are the 5 we always consider it to be muad, that it is expected? The following: Shane, the animal eats because it's hungry. You expect it to do that. Muedes lechol es haroila. It's normal for it to eat the food that it's expected to eat. Haregel muedes lishbor b'derech hilucha. Regel, damage that happens while the animal's just walking along and it bumps into things. Yeah, that's expected. You expect the animal to do that. Therefore, you have to pay full damages. V'shor hamuad, and an ox will become muad, expected damage, once it becomes categorically aggressive. Okay? And then v'hashor hamazik bershus hanizak. The next case is one where the animal caused damage in an area owned by the damaged party. In that scenario, even if it's done in an aggressive way, you have to be hyper vigilant when you're in someone else's property. And therefore, while it may have been out of character for the animal, you were responsible to have a higher level of watching when you're in someone else's property. Okay. And then the last one where it's expected, and therefore you're going to pay full damages, is ha'adam. The Gemara has a language of adam muad li'olam. And person is always considered muad. Damage is always expected. Now, what do I mean by that, right? I don't know. You and I, we're all sitting here, right? And nobody's hurting each other, right? Jack, watch out, okay? Charlie, watch out for Jack, all right? So what does that mean? Adam muad la'olam. We always expect people to do damage. What it means is, who am I responsible? What is my responsibility with regard to myself causing damage? I need to make sure I don't do it, right? Now, if I lose it and start getting aggressive, right? So what have I just done? It's like I let the beast out of the cage, right? Exactly, right? So I've now for myself lacked a proper shmira, And therefore, in that scenario, it's muad. It's expected for damage to occur. Okay, that's the basic svara. All right, now let's finish up the Mishnah, and then we have to come back to discuss that half payment. Okay, how we define that half payment. So now the Mishnah says there are some animals that are categorically considered aggressive by nature. The Mishnah says, Hazav, Hari, Hadov, Hanemer, Habardoles, Hanachash, Harelu Mu'adin. That a wolf, a lion, a bear, a hyena, a snake, a leopard is a nemer, a bardoles is a hyena, a nachash is a snake. Those are all considered muad, meaning that you expect them to do damage. Whether it was the first time, it doesn't matter. They always are going to do damage.
Just distinguishing between a behema and a chaya.
Yeah, behemoths are domesticated.
Right.
Yeah.
These are all non-domesticated.
These are all non-domesticated. Yeah. These are categorically dangerous animals. Rebbe Eliezer says that no, they're not all considered categorically dangerous or categorically that they are going to cause damage. It depends. Bisman shehein b'nei tarbus, if they're domesticated, and in muadin, then we don't consider like we're expecting them to do damage. However, hanachash, but when it comes to a snake, they're muad la'olam. You always expect a snake to do damage. It's impossible to domesticate a snake. Now, let's talk about that for a second. Let's talk about this for a second. What are the Chachamim and Rebbe Eliezer arguing about? Are they arguing about whether or not you can tame a lion, whether or not you can? What are they arguing about? Because that seems to be something that is not a halachic discussion. That should be something that if I wanted to know whether or not my lion is able to be domesticated, I shouldn't ask Rebbe Eliezer the Chachamim. I should ask a zoologist, right? So, I've heard from Rav Hirsch many times, who said in the name of one of his Rebbeim, Rav Aaron Soloveitchik, who's the brother of the Rav, that Rav Aaron Soloveitchik said that we have a Masorah that we don't have a machlokas in Mitzius. You can't have a machlokas about something that is just scientific fact. Scientific fact is scientific fact. You can't have a machlokas about that. So sometimes you find in the Gemara that there's a machlokas that takes place in scientific fact, like it sounds like this is. So what do you do when you get to a machlokas like that? He said you have to, as Rav Hirsch's language was, you have to lumdicize it. You have to lumdicize the machlokas. How do you lumdicize this machlokas in what sounds like scientific fact? Is as follows. The zoologists were consulted, and the zoologist gave some sort of a response. And the response was something, this is completely arbitrary, okay? But it's for the sake of illustration. The zoologist's response when they asked, can you tame a wolf or a lion or a bear, domesticate them? The answer was, it's possible. It's not likely, but it's possible. Is that enough to remove it from being its status of muad li'olam? That they're always considered to be aggressive to the point that it's always going to be a full penalty payment? Or do we say no? Being that it's possible for them to be domesticated, so then that's enough of a reason for us to say, therefore, you're not going to have to pay the full penalty. And when they asked the zoologist, he said, except for a snake. And that's why Rebbe Eliezer says, except for a snake. So you see, they're not arguing in fact. It's that the Chachamim say, no, that's not enough to remove it from its status of being a muad, just because it's possible, right? You find, right, like, Ringley Brothers, right? Ringley brother, right? Ringley Brothers Circle, right? Lion tamers, right? It's possible. It's possible. Is it likely? Probably not, right? The average lion owner, I don't know too many, but the average lion owner, right? Presumably is having trouble, training their lion, right? But it's possible. It's possible. So then, therefore, it's not going to be considered a muad li'olam, in a category of objectively muad. A snake is the one exception to that it's objectively muad. It's impossible to train a snake. Okay, that's an important. From a methodological standpoint, that's extremely important when learning. Okay, let's finish up the Mishnah. Ma bain, and this is the part I want to focus on. Ma bain tam lemuad. What's the difference in a tam and a muad? Elisha hatam b'shalim chatzi nezek megufo umuad b'shalim nezek shalim and aliyah. That when it comes to a tam, an animal that acts aggressively and it was unexpected for them to do so, you'd only pay half payments. But when it comes to an animal that's muad, it's expected for them to act aggressively. So then you have to pay nezek shalim. You have to pay the full damages. Now, in order to properly understand that machlokas about this half payment, we have to see the Gemara over here. There's the Gemara. It's on page 2 in the Hebrew, on line 29, and in the English, you'll find it on. You'll find it on page 9, column 1, line 35 by the arrow. The Gemara says the following: Itmar. We learned the following. The following statement was taught by the Amoraim. Palganiska, half damages. Rav Papa Amar Mimona. Rav Papa says that it's Charlie. Have it? Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, page 2.
Oh, that's back.
Yeah, page 2, line 29. Itmar, you got it? Yeah. Okay. Itmar, Palganiska, half damages. How do we categorize half damages? We'll ask the question a little differently. Why are you only paying half? Or why are you paying half at all? Right? Either you're responsible or you're not.
Yeah.
Right? So what's going on over here? So Rav Papa says Mimona. Palganiska, half damages, is mammon. It is reciprocity. You're paying what you owe. Rav Huna Breder of Yeshua. Rav Huna says knasa. It's a penalty payment. It's not. You're not obligated in it on from a liability standpoint. This is a penalty that is put upon you. So what are they arguing about? Rav Papa says mimona, that it's mammon, meaning that this is a monetary payment you're making a payment based off of something you owe. Kasavar, because he assumes stam shvarim, that the average ox, lav becheska shimor kaiman, is not categorically considered watching itself. You can't say that it's never expected they're going to do it. It's possible they're going to act aggressively, and therefore you should have been watching your animal better. And therefore, really theoretically, he should have had to pay the full payment. However, the Torah has rachmanas on the individual, on the owner, because of the fact that the akati lo ayid ture, because it was still unexpected for his animal to do that. Meaning that theoretically he should have had to pay the full thing, but because the Torah says v'lo yishmerenu, you weren't watching it, and only when you're not watching it, i.e., when it is expected, so then you're going to pay the full payment. If it's not expected, meaning even though this is your responsibility, still we're not going to make you pay the full things. But in reality, you theoretically should have had to pay the full thing. That's Rav Papa's understanding. Rav Huna Breder of Yeshua, and this is how we pass him, by the way. Rav Huna, we pass like Rav Huna, we're about to read. Rav Huna Breder of Yeshua, Rav Huna Breder of Yeshua says, knasa, it's a penalty. Kasavar, because we assume stam shvarim becheska shimor, that the average ox, the average domesticated animal, is considered shimor. It's considered like it's inherently watched already. No one's expecting it to do anything at all that is aggressive. Ubedinhu deloy l'shalim klal. And really, you shouldn't have to pay anything. Rachmanahu dekanse. But it's the Torah that puts a knas on the individual, puts a penalty on the individual, in order so that people are paying more attention to what their animals are doing. So we have over here is a fundamental machlokes in how we treat half damages. Half damages, or is it that in reality you should have had to pay the full thing, but the Torah is going to go easy on you, right? But really, it's a case of mammon, or is it a case of knas, where you really don't have to pay anything, except the Torah wants to penalize you over the fact that you should have been more responsible.
Actually, what it's saying is you shouldn't have a pet.
Why?
Because.
Or you have one, but you just have to be more responsible.
People think that pets will.
Yes, you have to be responsible with it. You shouldn't be a careless pet owner, right?
But I mean, a careless pet owner, what are you going to do? I mean, you're going to have a leash on a snake.
No, okay. So the snake should stay in the cage.
Yes.
In a but in right, exactly. Yeah. A snake is different. It's always muad. Yeah.
Snake is not good.
But anyway, but what comes out line, yeah. But what comes out from our Gemara, right? We're talking about the domesticated animals right now, right? So what's the practical implication? Okay, so what? Why does it matter which place what vantage point you're coming from? Either you should have had to pay the whole thing, and that this is reciprocity, and therefore, and the Torah just goes easy on you because this was unexpected, or it's that no, you shouldn't be expected to do anything. This is not reciprocity, and we're just penalizing you. What's the practical implication of that? So this is a real. This is a halacha l'maisa real implication. Okay, can Beis Din today sit and judge a case of half damages?
No, because you can't do time, can't do fines.
So if you take the assumption that it's mammon, so then, hi Debbie. If you take the assumption that it's mammon, so then Beis Din should be able to, right? Because it's paying up what you owe, right? But Beis Din today is not done on knossos. They're not allowed to judge cases of penalty payments. It's outside the realm of what Beis Din is allowed to do today. Only those with smicha are allowed to. It's a whole discussion of itself. Why? We can have another time. Why it is that at the Gemara later, maybe we'll get to on daf pay dalat and beis in Bava Kama. But Beis Din today is not allowed to judge cases of knas, of penalty. And then therefore, Beis Din today would not be able to judge cases of an animal that acted aggressively against another person or against another animal. If it acts aggressively, Beis Din is not allowed to touch those cases today because it can't touch those first initial 3 times, which are cases of penalty, before it can get to cases of it being already a muad, and then it can judge it after the 3rd time. But those first 3 times, it's not allowed to judge those times. And if it doesn't judge those times, then those first 3 instances don't register.
But Beis Din is allowed to count the first 3.
No. The Rambam says explicitly, you can't even count them.
But it can never get to be a muad.
Exactly. So those cases would go straight to the secular court. Those cases would go straight to the secular court. You don't have the way to do a Beis Din on those scenarios. Yeah, it's a real practical implication. Yeah. Okay.
If
yeah.
they assume that Rav Papa's reasoning was good, then they could do it, right?
If they assume Rav Papa's reasoning was good, then
it's not a penalty.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Then they still would be able to. But we paskin like Rav Huna. Yeah. But you're right. According to Rav Papa, no problem at all. Yeah. Exactly. All right. Good. Shkart, guys. All right.